Hey class, in today's lesson we're going to talk about the reciprocal function family, which is found in section 8-2, part 2 of your book. We're going to talk about graphing translations of reciprocal functions. Alright, so vertical and horizontal translations. The horizontal and the vertical translations are your h and your k, just exactly as they were your h and your k with cubic and quadratic functions. So remember your h as far as your horizontal translation is exactly which is opposite of what you think. So if I see a minus, that means I'm actually going to move to the right. If I see a plus, that means I'm going to move to the left. And specifically, let me point that out. I'm talking about right here. So plus or minus is opposite. So right versus left. And the plus or minus here is exactly what we think, but it's up and down. And then the other piece of information that's told here to you is that your vertical asymptote comes from your h, and your horizontal asymptote comes from your k. All right, so let's keep that in mind when we're trying to graph, and more specifically when it starts helping us with the domain and the range. All right, so it says, what is the graph of the function below? Identify the domain and range in the sketch. Okay, so really here, yeah, we could go in and we could start typing in our values, but if we know how this graph is translated based on this +4 and this -6, then we really don't have to do too much work, okay? So if I did, and I'm only asking for a sketch here, I'm not asking for a full graph. Remember that +4? That 4, because it's with the x, remember it's actually going to be my left or my right. And since it's +4, it's going to be opposite, so I'm going to go to the left 4. And then the -6 means I'm going to go down 6. So right in here is where I'm going to start wanting to kind of switch everything around. So don't forget, though, that the 4 is your vertical asymptote. So I have a vertical asymptote here. So my VA is x equals -4. And then I have a horizontal asymptote through -6. So horizontal asymptote is y equals -6. And then from here, all I need to do is sketch. So I'm just going to do a simple sketch about here. I have another sketch right about there. And then we just go on and state our domain and range. So our domain, remember, would be your x value. So my domain is all real numbers, except where is it going to cross over for the x value? Well, it's your vertical asymptote. So it's going to be all real numbers except x equals -4 because it's going to jump over that line. And then our range is all real numbers except where it's going to cross over the y-axis. So except y equals -6. And we are done. Now, if you remember from the previous day's lesson, okay, everything was just 0. And it makes sense why it was just 0, because we didn't have extra numbers here and here to influence a vertical or a horizontal asymptote. But for this particular problem, we do. So that's why we have actual numbers other than 0 as vertical and horizontal asymptotes. All right, let's look at our next problem. So we have y equals 1 over x minus 2 plus 4. So let's go ahead and draw just a simple graph. All right, so it is shifting that -2, right? It means I'm going to go to the right 2. So that is my vertical asymptote. So my VA is x equals 2. And then after I go 2, I'm going to go up 4. And so here's my horizontal asymptote at y equals 4. And it's positive, so we're going to use a normal function, a normal reciprocal function. So here is our sketch. And literally it's just a sketch because this is a bad graph if it was going to be a graph. And then we just need to finish with the domain and range. So our domain is all real numbers except x equals 2. And our range is all real numbers except y equals 4. And there we go. All right, with example 4, we're basically now taking it backwards, okay? So we're trying to figure out how the graph was shifted from the origin, right, which would have been a simple parent function. So we're trying to see how it was shifted from the origin to manipulate this particular function, okay? And then we'll have a final equation. Okay, now what's so important about this one is that this one isn't just a normal one, right? It's not just a y equals 1 over x, it's a y equals 2 over x. So it doesn't really change how it translates. It just kind of states that, hey, this one was stretched by a factor of 2. Okay, so if I look at how everything was moved here, it looks like, first of all, these are by 4s, right? So that means every tick mark is really 2. So if this was 2, this is really 3. So it moved left 3. So I'm just going to write what happened. And then it moved up 4. Now the up 4 is pretty easy, right? The up 4 would just be plus 4 at the end. All right, but left 3, remember, is opposite. So normally when we think left, we think negative, but in this case, it's going to be plus. So it's going to be plus 3. So our equation is y equals 2 over x plus 3 and then plus 4. And that's our final answer. Let's try another one. Once again, we just want to check to see how it's been shifted. Okay, these are by every tick mark is a 2. So it moved to the right 1. And it moved down 4. Okay, the down 4 is simple. It's just going to be minus 4. But remember, right is opposite. So instead of moving to the right and it being positive, it's going to be negative. So this function is going to be y equals 2 over x minus 1 and then minus 4. All right, so that's it for regular algebra 2. My next example is for pre-AP. All right, so I know this looks a little bit messy, but it basically says that the rowing club is renting a 57-passenger bus for a day trip. The cost of the bus is $750. 5 passengers will be chaperones. If the students who attend share the cost equally, what function models the cost per student C with respect to the number of students who attend? What is the domain of the function? How many students must ride the bus to make the cost per student no more than $20? Okay, so we're going to be doing quite a bit here. Yeah, quite a bit. So the first question asks us if the students who attend share the cost equally. Now, in order to share something equally or to do anything equally, that should kind of give you an idea that you're going to divide. Okay, so it says what function models the cost per student C. So our function is going to be C with respect to the number of students N who attend. So N represents the students. So how am I going to write a function that represents cost with N being students? So really that's pretty simple. We found the cost, we found the money. The money was $750. If we're going to split it equally between the amount of students, that's going to be $750 over N. So that's the first part of our equation. Okay, then it goes on to say, well, what is the domain of the function? So when they ask for the domain, remember they're asking for the x values. And in this case, the x values would represent the number of students. So in other words, x values, which are the domain, are going to represent the maximum number of students. Okay, so let's go back. This is a 57 passenger van or bus. But 5 of them are going to be chaperones. So how many, can be students? Well, if 57 minus 5 is going to give you 52. So 52 students max. So what would that look like as a domain? Well, as a domain, it'd be all real numbers. So not all real numbers. The domain would be 1 is less than or equal to x. Is less than or equal to 52, because you can have at most 52, and at the very least you can have 1 student. So 1 to 52. All right, now the only reason why we really want to know what the domain is because we're going to try and fix our window. So the real question comes when we start talking about how many students must ride to make the cost per student no more than $20, okay? So that's the really tricky part. So, and actually it's really not tricky. Really what we have now is we have 2 functions. We have c equals 750 over n, which let me go ahead and change that to y and make this an x, okay? And then the other one is basically saying y is equal to 20. So in other words, now we're setting 2 functions equal to each other. So 750 over x equals 20. What I want to do is put everything on one side. So I'm going to subtract 20 over. So I really have, how do I want to write this? I'm going to put y in the front because really it's really 0, but I'm making it y. Y equals, I'm going to go ahead and put that negative 20 in the front. Negative 20 plus 750 over x. Okay, so here's the deal. When we graph this, what I want you to do is type this into your calculator. And when you type that in, I want your x values, so your windows for your x min and your x max to be 1 and 52. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to have y equals, clear out anything that was in your calculator before. All right, so negative 20 plus, you need to be sure to put this 750 over x in parentheses. And then we graph, and don't forget, you need to make your x min 1 and your x max 52. And what you'll see is some sort of graph. A whole bunch of tick marks, and it's going to kind of cross like that. Okay, what we want to know, just like how we did with quadratics, is we want to know what this value is here. And to figure out what that is, we have to do the 0 function. So second trace, 0, left bound would be up here, right bound would be down there. So just pick a left bound, a right bound, enter, and we get that x equals 37.5. Now, here's the deal. If I typed in, because we need to have whole numbers. We can't have half of a student. So we need to figure out, do we need 37 students or do we need 38 students? So let's see. Well, if I do 750 divided by 37, that would mean that every student is $20.27. But we said no more than $20. So try again. 750 divided by 38 will give you $19.73 or 74 cents a student. So the amount of students would be, you'd have to have 38 students. And we are done. Okay, let's try this example again just to be sure that we've got it and that we know how to use the calculator functions. All right, so it's saying that the junior class is renting a laser tag facility with a capacity of 325 people. The cost of the facility is $1,200. The party must have 13 adult chaperones. If the students who attend share the facility equally, blah, blah, blah. We can read. All right, so here's the deal. Again, the first question asks, what is the function as it relates to the cost? So cost per student here. So that function is going to be C equals 1200 over N. We know later that we're going to change this to Y and X. So let's just go ahead and do that now. All right. And then it also says, so that's the first answer. Then it says, what is the domain of the function? Well, how many people, right? Because N is our variable here. N is the amount of students. So how many students can we have? Well, we can have at max 325 people. But you have to take out the 13 chaperones. So really that leaves you with, what is that, 312 students. So our domain is 1 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 312. And that's going to help us with our window for our function. And so then it says, what is the, how many students must attend to make the cost no more than $7.50 per student? So remember, that's when I throw in this other equation and say, well, that's when y equals $7.50. So I have two functions that I need to set equal to one another. That means I'm going to subtract $7.50 on both sides. Really, this right-hand side is going to equal 0, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's y. So y equals negative 7.50 plus 1200 over x. By the way, you could put the 1200 over x in the front. It doesn't matter. Just be sure that you still, when you type it into the calculator, that you put that part in parentheses. So if we put that in parentheses and we type this in, so negative 7.5 plus, in parentheses, 1200 divided by x, and then we graph. Once again, and don't forget, and I almost forgot, you need to fix your window to be 1 and 312. You'll see a graph that kind of looks like this. Okay, remember left bound is up here, right bound is here, because we're trying to look for that value there. So second trace, 0, left bound, right bound. And in this case, we get a solid number, and we get that x equals 160 students. And just to verify, we could do 1200 divided by 160, and we would get exactly $7.50. And we are done. All right, guys, remember, if you have any questions, come see me for tutoring.